The sequel to Marvel's Spider-Man and Miles Morales had a lot to live up to. Spider-Man 2 is a worthy continuation of the series, with more villains wreaking havoc, more balance in the personal and professional and superhero lives, more emotion, and more swinging of the web-based variety. This is a game that doesn't necessarily improve on what came before, but perfects some areas and tweaks others. It's a game that offers more of the good stuff at the risk of becoming a touch too familiar. After the events of both Spider-Man 2018 and Miles Morales, Peter Parker has taken on a mentorship role for the younger, less experienced Miles. At the same time, he and Mary Jane have moved into Aunt May's one-time home, Harry Osborn has made a miraculous return, and Kraven the Hunter has arrived in town. There's a lot going on in Spider-Man 2, but it's never overwhelming, nor does any aspect feel overshadowed by another. The best Spider-Man stories are the ones that show the struggles of everyday life balanced against those of being a superhero. This one is no exception. Peter tries to do a lot, and he has a hard time doing so. Miles is contemplating his future education and real-world career possibilities, while also trying to embrace the superhero he's trying to be. The game, the writing and the performances do a great job at showcasing these struggles and frustrations, with many dramatic beats coming from the characters losing it in the moment and showcasing their personal problems. On the superhero front, it's traditional Marvel and superhero genre flair. A bad guy shows up, he's up to no good, the heroes investigate, some twists and turns are thrown in, and then the heroes save the day. That shouldn't come as a surprise or be considered a spoiler. Spider-Man 2 does a great job of building the suspense and establishing a mystery, but as it enters its third act, the answers aren't always satisfying and the action often takes over. It's all suitably dramatic and exciting, with character motivations and emotions reaching a crescendo, but the story does venture into very predictable, generic territory. At the front of the story and game are the two Spider-Men. This time around you play as both Miles and Peter, each with their own unique skills and abilities, as well as a combined skill tree for universal, shared powers like swinging and traversal. If you've played the prior two games, what's on offer for both characters should be familiar. Peter relies heavily on gadgets with a more focused arsenal on hand this time around. There are 4 gadgets, one that propels enemies, one that pulls them together, one that zaps them, and another that launches them into the air. These combined with the web shooters allow some variety in combat sections, enhancing your chances of building a hit streak, and provides you with more ways to play. If you want Peter Parker to rely purely on fists and webs, you can do that. Miles meanwhile has electrical powers. He and Peter share the gadgets on offer. These electrical powers truly set Miles apart from Peter and make for more enjoyable, exciting experience in combat, with abilities that can lunge enemies across an arena, ones that zap all in sight, and more. They're arguably a tad overpowered, but they are a visual and auditory spectacle, lighting up the screen and building adrenaline well. Peter is not without his abilities though. He has 4 extendable robot spider arms as seen in some comic books and in the Tom Holland movies. His powers are less visibly awe-inducing, but he can do some special things with them, such as launch enemies into the air, spin attack, and more. Outside of combat, the stealth sequences also have a new gadget, a line launcher. Now, both Peter and Miles can extend the web across arenas, enhancing their versatility and ability to sneak. This new gadget is cool, but makes stealth segments a touch too simplistic. All you must do is launch a line, sit in the middle, and take down enemies as they pass on by. Stealth is also an underutilized part of the game, with many of the main missions foregoing it completely. For the most part, stealth is relegated to the side missions, which are very much akin to the Kingpin dens of the first game. You arrive at an enemy-riddled building or site, and it's up to you to take them down however you want. It's great to have the option to do stealth approaches, but the game and its story rarely promotes it outside of specific story moments, which are more about stealthy traversal rather than enemy takedowns. One of the more disappointing areas of the first game were the Mary Jane segments. Sadly, Insomniac either didn't get the message or simply ignored it, because those segments are back, albeit in a more action-orientated way. This time around, Mary Jane's sections are stealth focused, all about getting from point A to B, often without getting seen or with a retrieval objective in between. She is equipped with an almighty taser gun this time around, one that takes out enemies very quickly and easily. begging the question of why Peter and Miles don't invest in such tech. Her segments are therefore more engaging and enjoyable than those of the first game, but they are still the least enjoyable part of playing this game due to the forced limitations of what you can and cannot do. On the villain front, this game is stacked. Lizard plays a pivotal role in the story, and his depiction as an enormous monster is intense and thrilling. What's fascinating is the approach to Lizard and other minor villains. A key theme of this game is of redemption and reformation. Without spoiling it, the game dives into the motivations of the villains more and brings up questions of how villainous they are. This connects smartly with the main narrative and the primary antagonists too, providing the game its story and characters with more depth and larger messaging. The main antagonists of the game are Kraven the Hunter and Venom. Kraven is depicted in a slightly different way than normal. He's not a lone hunter out to take down the biggest, baddest competition he can find. This time around, he's a wealthy man with his own mercenary group doing his bidding. It robs the man of some of his mystique, but the game still presents him as a menacing, intimidating threat physically and mentally. The mercenaries also make up the bulk of the primary foes you face in the game, with standard grunts, bulkier brutes, and a variety of tech-based foes too. On the enemy front, there's little new on offer until later in the game, but even the late game enemies replicate traditional tropes and enemy types. What is somewhat new and does offer enemy variety are the flying based foes such as drones and animal like robots. These enemies have gadgets that force you to mix things up. Focus on taking them down first, otherwise you are unable to use your own powers in combat. Having enemies in the air and on the ground amps up the challenge in a fun way. Venom meanwhile is perhaps the most disappointing part of the game. Venom for the most part is attached to Peter Parker, granting him access to some brutal new powers. These Venom powers are cool and make for some violent encounters, particularly towards the back end of the game. Peter can stretch his arms and attack enemies in bulk, he can slam them down with force, or erupt and take down all enemies around him. A power that requires build-up also allows Peter to take down enemies with one blow, offering some grisly aggressive animations in the process. On a story point, Venom himself doesn't become a character until well into the third act of the game. Tony Todd takes over the voice duties here, and his depiction is perhaps the best seen outside of comic books or certain animated TV shows. The story up to that point is also the best Venom-focused tale I've seen outside of those mediums too. Sadly though, in the third act of the game, Venom is reduced to being a monster who you must take down at all costs. The final stretch of the story often resorts to over-the-top action with mass destruction, and defeating Venom becomes less about brains or skill and more about which of you can hit the other harder. It's held up by a suitable level of emotion from the characters and their awesome performances, especially Yuri Lowenthal, who plays Peter as he slowly transforms into an eviler, twisted form of himself. But it lacks the nuance or originality to stand out from other games and stories of its type, and it all feels very rushed and crammed into the final act of the game. For a game whose marketing heavily focused on Venom, it's odd that so little of the game actually features him. What the game does feature a lot of is New York City. The map is almost twice the size of the prior games, with new boroughs and environments to explore. What it doesn't do, however, is provide you with enough things to do in the city. Main missions are good, often elevated by set pieces and exciting sequences, but the side content is a big letdown, relying heavily on mini-games that quickly lose their fun factor, and fetch quests that lack investment on a story or character level. There are random crimes like those of the first game, but this time around they are purely optional. Many of the side activities simply lack ingenuity and feel ripped straight out of the prior games and other open world games of their like, with a fresh coat of paint applied. Minigames include a first-person bee hunt, a DNA sequencer with basic puzzle mechanics, and one that involves the DualSense's gyroscopic abilities for precise pressure application. There's variety there, but so much of it feels like filler with little satisfaction. This means that when traversing the city outside of the main quests and the more story-oriented side quests, there's little to do in New York. Traversal, luckily enough, is as satisfying as ever, perhaps more so than ever before thanks to the new gliding mechanics. Both Peter and Miles now don wingsuits and can essentially fly across the city at breakneck speed. When they enter wind tunnels spread out across the environment, speed is built up and height is gained. An argument can be made that it robs swinging of its fun and usefulness, but it makes traversal fast, fun and exciting. So much of the game focuses on you getting from one side of the city to another, By the end of the 20 to 30 hour campaign, even the traversal starts losing its appeal, just a little bit. If you do lose interest in swinging and gliding, fast travel is an option. This time around, fast travel takes full advantage of the PlayStation 5's SSD, allowing for near instant transportation across the city. Each district requires you to unlock fast travel by completing a series of crimes, missions or collectibles at said location. Once unlocked, a simple button press and a few seconds later, you're there. It's very impressive, very useful, and it's the future of fast travel in gaming. No loading screens, no waiting. Similarly, you can switch between Miles and Peter at any point in the game, so long as the characters aren't locked to a specific story moments. This too is near instantaneous and works somewhat like Grand Theft Auto 5's character switching. You push a button and a few seconds later you're playing as the other Spider-Man, getting a brief glimpse at what they're up to. Both Spider-Man also exist in the same open world, meaning you can bump into the other, or the other can show up and lend you a hand in fighting crime. It's moments like this that enhance the open world, real vibe of the game, but they are a rarity, and there are few other instances that enhance this. Where the game never loses its appeal are in its graphics and fidelity. There are options to play this game almost whatever way you want. You can opt for full 4K with marvelously rendered resolution and ray tracing, or you can go for a higher frame rate offering faster, smoother gameplay. Or you can even try something in the middle if you have a VRR capable screen. These, mixed with the superb 3D sound and Dolby Atmos capabilities of the PlayStation 5, make Spider-Man 2 a technical masterpiece. It's stunning to look at, mesmerising to play, and there's a plethora of accessibility options thrown in too, allowing even more gamers to partake in its adventures. Playing in the VRR mode presents the best experience in my opinion, with high frames, light ray tracing, and good resolution throughout. The game is not without its bugs and hiccups, but it's mostly smooth and very well optimised, adding to the PlayStation's reputation for high quality gaming experiences. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is another engaging, exciting outing for the web-swinging heroes, one that emphasises both the superhero and more mundane aspects of their lives. Its combat, stealth, traversal and characters are all excellent, but its story often delves into familiar territory, and the game doesn't offer much in the way of new things to do from its predecessors.